Wow. Wow. The comeback kids did it again. They did it again. But this time they picked up the phone and they called 12. So I'm going to tell you why. Morant just had one of the biggest and best late game performances in Grizzlies playoff histories. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, DeMichael Cole. I am here today solo by myself. Sean Coleman is off today, but man, what a game. What a late quarter performance by Morant. What a closing performance by Morant. What a game by the Grizzlies. What a comeback. Just wow. I'm at a loss for words. But we're going to get through this episode. We're going to talk about what happened, how this unfolded, and everything in between. But it started with Morant, 18 points in the fourth quarter in this come-behind victory, the most points from a Grizzlies player ever in a single quarter in franchise history. And what better quarter to do it in the fourth quarter? What better time to do it? In a 2-2 series, the team was on their heels. The Timberwolves had another double-digit lead. It was looking like it was going to be 3-2. Going back to Minnesota, just the very worst-case scenario. And Morant, I mean, it's like he put his cape on. You know, his cape was missing for a lot of this series. Superman wasn't here. You know, even Ja himself said he wasn't Ja. But Game 5, that was Morant at his very best. But 30 points overall, 13 rebounds, 9 assists, 9 of 22 shooting from the field. Morant just put together that fourth quarter. I think that was the best playoff quarter for a Grizzlies player in franchise history. Up there with any quarter in franchise history. But what made that quarter even that much more special was the lead up to it. He struggled. Morant was missing free throws. He started 4 of 10 from the free throw line. He missed his first 3 free throws of the game. Not only was he struggling on free throws, he was struggling shooting 3-pointers. He was 0 of 3 from the 3-point line. He was struggling to the point where he ended up changing shoes. Started the game in his KD 4s, and he switched into his Kobe 6s in the second quarter. And, you know, the struggles just kept mounting up. And it was like, man, this is just how this series is going to go for Ja. But that fourth quarter, and even right before the fourth quarter, I think we got a precursor to the fourth quarter late in the third. The very last points of the third, the Grizzlies were down 95-82 when Morant drove to the basket, jumped up and over the 6'4" Malik Beasley, and just posterized him. Threw down one of his poster dunks, and he didn't celebrate. That's how you knew he was locked in. There wasn't much celebration. He looked for like half a second, got back on defense, and the Grizzlies were down 11 going into the fourth. Bigger goals were in mind, but Morant showed something in this game. I think watching up close, sitting courtside at this game, this was the most trash I've seen Morant talk during the playoffs in terms of responding to players who were, you know, saying things to him and whatnot. And after the game, he kind of gave us a hint. You know, he basically said, you know, I'm not going to say what sparked me. He didn't. He didn't say it. But you can kind of read in between the lines and see how the game unfolded. And of course, like I said, I was sitting right there. And some of the things I saw, you know, I saw how Patrick Beverley and Morant were going at it the whole game. They were talking. When Patrick Beverley picked up his third foul, John Morant was right there. He held up three fingers. He walked over to Patrick Beverly, said some things to him, had a little laugh as Patrick Beverly walked to the bench in the second quarter with his third foul. Then, fourth quarter, when Patrick Beverly drove the basketball, the Timberwolves are up 1 point late in the fourth quarter, about 4 minutes left to play, 4.5 minutes left to play. Patrick Beverly drove the basketball against John Morant, finished like a hook shot over him, and then he did the too little gesture on his way back up the court. Not only did he do the too little gesture on his way back up the court, he did it in front of Ja's dad, T. Morant, Usher, who was at the game, the R&B artist Usher, Zach Randolph, who was also sitting over there in the section, and several other, people in Morant's camp. Plus, there were other celebrities also in that section as well. Lil Boosie, the rapper, was over there. He kind of tried to show off John Morant, put his hand down, did the too little gesture. So you know what? John Morant comes back on the next possession, goes at D'Angelo Russell, scores over him, and he does the too little gesture on the way back up the court. So some of you may be saying, oh, well, it wasn't on Patrick Beverly. Well, let me rewind you. Let me take you back. Because it was when Patrick Beverly in his press conference was sitting right next to D'Angelo Russell, and he was asked, about going at Ja. And he said, I like that matchup. And then D'Angelo Russell chimed in and said, I like that matchup too. So I don't know if Ja saw that or not, but I wouldn't be surprised. Ja Morant is that type of guy to keep those mental notes. So yeah, he comes right back up the court and retaliates with his own too little gesture, a little more exaggerated version to let you know that he was responding. And we were off and running. It wasn't just with those two guys. The talk was heavy overall in this game. I believe there were 4 technical fouls handed out. Desmond Bane, Jared Vanderbilt, and so forth. Like, Bane had an altercation with the Timberwolves coach, Chris Finch. The talking was there. Desmond Bane even said after the game that the Timberwolves players in the fourth quarter, they were kind of saying that the Grizzlies were about to break. They're about to fold, as Desmond Bane said. And he said he knew that wasn't the case. The Timberwolves should have known that wasn't the case because this is their second fourth quarter blown lead of more than 10 points in this series. It almost was 3. They won game 4 after being up 15 points. So they've blown 2 double-digit leads. And they still were saying, this team's about to fold. So that shows the confidence that the Timberwolves have, but it also shows the resiliency in the Grizzlies. It was just a crazy comeback, but getting back to Ja Morant, there was the too little gesture and everything, but he got the last laugh. Patrick Beverly picked up his last foul. He fouled out with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And like I said, I was sitting right in front of him. Ja Morant, first, as Patrick Beverly fouled out on the Timberwolves side of the floor, he walked away. Patrick Beverly walked away towards the Grizzlies free throw line, walking angrily, like walking away from the action. Who followed right up behind Patrick Beverly? It was Ja Morant. And I couldn't hear his words. It was loud. Everyone was cheering because Patrick Beverly had fouled out of the game. But Ja Morant was speaking very abrasively, trash talking Patrick Beverly loudly on his way out of the game, all the way until Patrick Beverly went to the bench. So there's no love, lost with Patrick Beverly leaving the game there in that matchup. But this was the most I've seen Ja Morant. He kind of has held it together, I think, for the most part of this series, or he just hasn't felt the need, to respond. But the chatter was there. The intensity overall from both of these teams was there. Karl Anthony Towns hits the three-pointer in the fourth quarter to give the Timberwolves a 92-79 lead, 13-point lead. And he starts to shush the crowd, on his way back up the court after the timeout. So there was a lot of talking both ways. The Grizzlies got the final laugh, and Ja Morant was a big reason why. And some other players who are a big reason why for the Grizzlies were Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark. They have been probably the MVPs for the Grizzlies So coming up, we're going to talk about why Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark have been the two biggest keys to the Grizzlies' success so far in this series. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about Shady Rays because springtime is here. It's the spring, and the sun has been out. The sun is out, and it's shining bright, and you need those shades. So go over to Shady Rays and get your sun. You get your sunglasses at Shady Rays. Shady Rays offers you the features that you can get with $200 sunglasses, but you get them for just a fraction of the price with Shady Rays. I'm talking polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Shady Rays also has a protection program, so if you lose your sunglasses, Shady Rays will send you a new pair no matter what. So head over to shadyrays.com, use the code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. So again, head over to shadyrays.com and use the promo code locked on to get 50% off 2 or more featured pairs of polarized sunglasses. Desmond Bane, Brandon Clark, those have been the two best players, the two biggest keys to success for the Grizzlies. Ja Morant, as great as he was in that fourth quarter, he struggled a lot of this series. Desmond Bane has been consistent. Brandon Clark has been consistent. Those two players are why the Grizzlies are in this position. And that did not change in game 5. I think it was ironic that they both came to the press conference and spoke together because it was just, symbolic of how this series has gone. Those two players have been the biggest factors of success. So let's talk about Desmond Bane first. Desmond Bane has been killing it from the three-point line. Games 3 and games 4, 7 3-pointers each. You had to know that Minnesota was going to run him off the three-point line in this game. Chris Finch talked about, before the game, how they can limit Desmond Bane and things like that. They ran him off of the three-point line. He's made 7 3-pointers in each of the last 2 playoff games in game 3 and game 4. He only attempted 8 in this one. Shot 3 of 8. Decent percentage. But that did not stop Desmond Bane from scoring. Desmond Bane was getting out in transition on layups. He was pump faking at the three-point line, running himself off the three-point line, knocking down mid-range jumpers, getting to the basket. Desmond Bane showed why, he's become more of a complete player because he's not just a spot-up shooter. If he was just a spot-up shooter, they would have taken him out of the game plan with just running him off of the three-point line. But that's not Desmond Bane. There's more to his game, as evident by his 25 points on 9 of 20 shooting. And how about 45 minutes? A lot of talk has been around Taylor Jenkins, not letting these guys play 40 minutes a game. Ja Morant and Desmond Bane both played 45 minutes in game 5. After the game, Ja Morant said it felt like knives were in his knees at a point. But you couldn't tell. Down the stretch, Ja Morant makes 2 big baskets, makes the three-pointer to give the Grizzlies a 1-point lead, then finishes it off at the end with the game-winning layup. And even before that, Desmond Bane, big three-pointer in the fourth quarter. Desmond Bane, big shots just to keep the Grizzlies in the game throughout the game. 25 points for him. Desmond Bane is averaging 23.6 points on 47.5% shooting in this series. That's it. That's 23.6 points is what Desmond Bane is averaging in this series. They have not had an answer for him. They run him off the three-point line, and he still succeeds. So Brandon Clark was the MVP of Game 5. Hands down, no questions about it. Jaren Jackson, foul trouble. Xavier Tillman got the start, had a decent impact. But what Brandon Clark did was absolutely save this team. There was so much trust in Brandon Clark in this game. He was the only big man in the game, and the Grizzlies ran 4-guard lineup basically at the end, which we have not seen that lineup much, if at all. Tyus Jones, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks. Shout out to Taylor Jenkins, Grizzlies coach, for putting his best 5 players on the floor regardless of position. It's positional in basketball. You need your 5 best players on the floor, and that's what he did. He said, the heck with positions. I know it doesn't sound super smart to put Dylan Brooks on Karl Anthony Towns, but you know what? Dylan Brooks is a physical guy. You got 4 guards, feisty guards on the floor at the same time, and it worked out. But Brandon Clark, offensive rebounding, it's been the Grizzlies' key card all season long. And a lot of that's been because the number one offensive rebounder in the NBA is Steven Adams. But I've said it time and time again. Brandon Clark, he's a big reason why this team is the number one offensive rebounding team too. And you look at the 6'8" size, 225 frame, it doesn't matter. He has pogo sticks in his knees. Brandon Clark has pogo sticks in his knees. He's jumping out of the building. He's always in the right spot. He just has that nose for the basketball. He's a tenacious guy. And you're looking at this game unfold in the fourth quarter. Brandon Clark had 7 offensive rebounds in that fourth quarter. 21 points, 15 rebounds overall. And how about 37 minutes? Again, we talk about Taylor Jenkins, taking these guys and saying, look, I'm going to play my best players regardless. And Brandon Clark averaged a little over 19 minutes in the regular season. He just almost doubled his regular season minutes production in his game, and they needed him for each and every one of those minutes. The 21 points was huge because he comes off the bench. I know some of you have been asking, why isn't Brandon Clark starting? Well, it's because at the end of the day, your starting 5 doesn't really matter. Your closing 5 is the most important thing. Brandon Clark is in the closing lineup. He's going to be in the closing lineup. We've seen him in the closing lineup in the regular season, point blank period there. Also, if you start, him, you don't have a scoring punch off the bench from the inside. So you start Jaren Jackson Jr., who actually got off to a really good start in this game, and you start Xavier Tillman, and you bring in Brandon Clark, and he gives you that boost, and that's what he did in this game. But the rebounding was my big takeaway. The scoring we've seen Brandon Clark do a lot of that, and the rebounding we've seen that too, but he was the only big out there. How about the tipped out rebound? Like I said, the Grizzlies were shelling 106 to 104. There was a minute and 5 left. Tyus Jones got an open look from three-point range. Open look. Missed it. He missed the three-pointer. Brandon Clark was in traffic, surrounded by bodies. He got that hand up again, 6'8", but he jumps out of the building. Pogo sticks in his knees. He jumped up and kind of volleyball swatted the ball. And the ball landed right into Ja Morant's hands. Perfect timing. I know I mentioned earlier how Ja Morant didn't make a 3 in the first 3 quarters. 0 of 3. That ball landed right in Morant's hands. All he had to do is calmly look down, make sure he was behind the three-point line, look up, he let it go. Boom. 1-point lead for the Grizzlies because Brandon Clark tipped that basketball out and made a play. He was the MVP of this game. And he's been arguably the MVP of the series, right up there with Desmond Bane. Those 2 players, Brandon Clark and Desmond Bane, they're showing the Grizzlies' depth. Because you come into this series, you talk about Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., and you of course you expect big things from Desmond Bane, but you talk about Dylan Brooks as well. Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark have been insanely consistent. And again, 2 players that the Grizzlies drafted, on the back end of the first round. That's a Zach Kleiman, compliment there, what they're doing. And it's different in Memphis. I think Damian Lillard tweeted during game 3 or game 4 that Memphis drafts so well, and having guys like Brandon Clark and Desmond Bane, second-year player in Desmond Bane, third-year player in Brandon Clark, step up into these big, massive roles and be afforded the opportunity of, Ja Morant to struggle for the most part of the game, Jaren Jackson to struggle, Steven Adams to be out of a rotation, Zaire Williams, right knee soreness, left the game after playing just 4 minutes. Those 2 guys stepped up big. You got 25 points from Desmond Bane. You got 21 points from Brandon Clark. Incredible performances from those two. But, after an incredible performance, something that's really good for you is Built Bar. Even when I'm having an incredible performance, whether it's after I write an incredible story or whether it's, after an incredible lunch, Built Bar is my go-to snack. I don't know if you like milk mint brownie, coconut almond, white chocolate. Everyone knows my favorite is the white chocolates, cookies and cream, but you also have the puff. Built Bar has low calorie, high protein candy bars that are better than your typical unhealthy candy bars. And if you haven't tried the puffs yet, you're missing out. You're missing out because it's one of the best options at Built Bars. They're the very first protein infused marshmallows. They're fluffy, and it's not just a protein bar. It's a treat because it's covered in 100% real chocolate. So if you want your Built Bar like me, all you have to do is go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. That's promo code LOCKED15, and you can get 15% off of your order. So we talked about all these great things that have gone on with the Grizzlies. Brandon Clark, Desmond Bane, Ja Morant's fourth quarter for the ages. But the Grizzlies struggled in this game too. Now, there has to be the constructive criticism, and that's what we're about to lay out. Because at the end of the day, the Grizzlies escaped this game, and they've escaped twice. So you take those two games, game 3 and game 5. These two games where the Grizzlies escaped by the hair of their chin. Take those two games away. That's 4 wins for Timberwolves. Series would be over. If the Timberwolves knew how to hold double-digit leads in the fourth quarter, series would be over. But again, I'm not going to take away anything from the Grizzlies' resiliency. I got here in December, and it was one of the first things that stood out to me, and it's one of the things that stood out during this run. The Grizzlies are a resilient bunch, and this is nothing new. This is nothing new, but the constructive criticism here is, there are a couple things. One, shooting. Shooting is been a problem for the Grizzlies. We've talked about it all season long. We talked about it, and the Grizzlies almost lost this game because the Timberwolves just straight up shot the ball a lot better from three-point range. The Timberwolves, 14 made three-pointers on 33 attempts. Memphis shot 7 of 28. So basically, the Timberwolves doubled them up at the three-point line. 21 more points from the three-point line for the Timberwolves than the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies also shot 26 of 39 from the free throw line. I know I mentioned Ja started 4 of 10, but I believe he made his last 6 free throw attempts, and it made his last 7, actually, in that game. So he finished strong, but overall, the Grizzlies shot 26 of 39 from the free throw line. I believe Brandon Clark also 3 of 7 from the free throw line. It didn't deter them in this game, but these are things you have to think about as you get further and further in the playoffs against those teams that make minimal mistakes, against those teams, that aren't going to blow those fourth quarter leads. I think about Golden State, who's a potential next round opponent. I think about, the Suns, and I believe they're 49-0 when leading going into the fourth quarter. Those teams aren't going to make those same mistakes that the Timberwolves made when they played this heavy ISO ball down the stretch. So the Grizzlies have to fine-tune those areas, the three-point shooting, the free throw shooting, just shooting overall. But, that goes to show the Grizzlies won this game. Consider it a steal. The Grizzlies won this game shooting 7 of 28 from the three-point line, shooting 26 of 39 from the free throw line. And with basically 2 players, Brandon Clark and Desmond Bane, playing consistent all game long. You didn't get much from Dillon Brooks in this game. Dillon Brooks was, I believe, 1 of 10 from the three-point line. You didn't get much from Jaren Jackson Jr. Ja was Ja, but it took until the fourth quarter for Ja Morant to be Ja Morant. And you didn't get much from, other players off the bench. Tyus Jones had some really big minutes. I don't want to, undermine the minutes. I believe he played 20 minutes. So there was a lot of Ja and Tyus in this game playing together. As I mentioned earlier, they were both in the closing lineup where it was Ja Morant, Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, and Brandon Clark, a smaller unit overall. But it was a great move by Taylor Jenkins to go to that unit. But speaking of one guy, who wasn't missing from that unit, who was missing from that unit actually was Jaren Jackson Jr. It's mind-boggling, at this point, because I watched the first half of this game. Jaren Jackson Jr. No, well, before I even get to the first half, I watched the first quarter. Jaren Jackson Jr. came out playing on fire, and I'm sure you saw it as well, Locked On Grizzlies viewers. He made a three-pointer. Then he made, another big basket. And it's like, oh, this is it. And he has 3 rebounds early. And, he's not been known for his rebounding, early in his career, but he was aggressive at the start of this game. And just watching him in warm-ups, I was talking with one of the other writers, and they came up to me and was like, Jaren looks locked in. And I said, yeah, I see it. He wasn't joking around. He wasn't really, talking to people and waving at fans or anything. He was just grabbing the ball, taking his shots with a straight face. And Jaren Jackson, he's kind of a goofy guy. We talked to him in the media. He's kind of a goofy guy. So it was just looking at him, it was like, oh, he's locked in. And then he kind of started the game that way. But foul trouble. 2 fouls in the first. Picked up his 3rd foul in the second, went to the bench. Picked up his 4th foul in the third, went to the bench. Picked up 2 fouls by the midway point of the 4th quarter. He was gone. It's been a problem all series long, and in this game, Jaren Jackson Jr. only played 18 minutes. In 18 minutes, he had 12 points, 5 rebounds, 2 blocks. 18 minutes. Imagine what he could do. And I mentioned, for example, Brandon Clark played 36 minutes, 37 minutes in this game. 18 minutes, if you doubled Jaren Jackson Jr.'s minutes and you doubled his production, you would have gotten 24 points, 10 rebounds, 4 blocks. Probably even more if he, played consistently in a rhythm. But those are big-time numbers. He's a big part of this series, and we're just not getting to see it. I think at this point, it's just, the Timberwolves know how to attack him. The Timberwolves know how to attack him. It's also Jaren Jackson Jr. making some mistakes, himself, in terms of the offensive fouls and things of that nature. And we asked him after the game, about the fouls, and he said, look, he just has to show his hands, which is correct. He needs to show his hands a little bit better, and we'll see where he goes from here. But at this point, it's been 5 games. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been in foul trouble in each of those games, and you just can't depend on him. You can't rely on him. It's a good thing that the Grizzlies have Brandon Clark. It's a good thing they have Brandon Clark, because right now you just can't depend on Jaren Jackson Jr. When he's good, he's really good, but it's not been dependable. Something you can depend on, Locked On Grizzlies fans, is go over to Locked On Now. Locked On Now is where you get a quick recap of all the action from the NBA's games that day from the Locked On Grizzlies experts. So make sure you tune in to Locked On Now wherever you listen to your podcast as well. So Locked On Grizzlies podcast too, which is available everywhere. That's Spotify, that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. On YouTube, you can go get the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, and you also can get Locked On Now. So make sure you're subscribing, you comment to all the things that we're doing here with Locked On Grizzlies, and make sure you follow me as well. Follow me on Twitter at DeMichaelC. You can also read my work with the Commercial Appeal at commercialappeal.com, and that's where all of my game recaps, analysis, and feature stories are written as well. But this was a big win for the Grizzlies. It was a big win. It was an important win. It looked like the Grizzlies were about to go down 3-2 and they were going to head to Minnesota. And that would have been tough. That would have been tough. But all is well now with another fourth quarter comeback. John Morant sounded like he's tired of this he's tired of the comeback thing. Taylor Jenkins, he's tired of it too. But at the end of the day, this is the position that the Grizzlies have, put themselves in. They've been able to dig out of it twice. You wonder, can they have another clean game like they did in game 2? No better time to have a clean game than game 6 in Minnesota. So we'll see, how it turns out, how it goes, because at this point, the Grizzlies, they might want to go ahead and close this team out. Game 7 in Memphis, yeah, it would be at home, but this Timberwolves team, the way they're shooting the ball, if they could clean up some of those fourth quarter mistakes, they'll win. It's that simple for them. They are a really talented group, but the Grizzlies have persevered again, showing that the resiliency of this team isn't just some talking point. It is something that this team really personifies, not just now, but throughout this entire season. John Morant got the end left-handed layup over Jared Vanderbilt. Anthony Edwards gambled on the play, got the game-winning bucket. Then he raised his hand up and said, you know what? Call 12. Call 12. So it was a big win for the Grizzlies. But before you leave us here, Locked On Grizzlies viewers, make sure you tuned in to Locked On NBA as well. Locked On NBA is where you can get coverage of everything going on around the NBA from our Locked On experts. So that's, coverage of everything that's going on in the playoffs. That's coverage of everything that's going to be going on during the draft season and everything in between. Locked On NBA is available wherever you get your podcast. So make sure you tune in to Locked On NBA too. But that'll be all for today. Grizzlies fans, enjoy the day off. There's going to be one more day off. I'm going to travel to Minnesota, so I'll be with you from Minnesota as well. But enjoy the day off because this series is intense. And I've had people texting me and saying things like the Grizzlies show aren't helping, their blood pressure and things like that, because it's been an intense series. I know your heart is racing over there, but breathe in, breathe out, get ready for game 6, and we'll see you tomorrow on Locked On Grizzlies.